I'm currently facing a strange dilemma in my life. It's not so much a problem as it is a tough decision I've been grappling with. For years now, my mother and sister have been exploiting me, taking advantage of my financial stability. I've been there for them, offering support in many forms, but lately they've pushed things too far. I'm at a point where I'm considering cutting them out of my life, but that would mean leaving them in a dire financial situation, and I'm not sure if I can do that. I'm torn between the guilt of knowing I'd be abandoning them and the overwhelming exhaustion of constantly giving in to their demands. A bit about me. I'm 38 years old, married with 2 kids. I've lived in Ohio for 6 years after moving here following my wedding. I'm originally from Houston, where I grew up in a family fractured by divorce. My parents separated when I was just 10, and my sister was only 5. The reason behind their split remains a mystery to this day. My dad accused my mom of infidelity, but my mom never remarried, and the truth of his claims has always been in question. Despite the circumstances, my father left us, though he did offer alimony and allowed us to stay in the family home. When it came to my education, my father covered the costs for me but didn't do the same for my sister. It's still a point of confusion for me, as I can't understand why my mom didn't fight for child support for my sister. Over the years, people seem to believe my father's accusations about her, and that only further strained my relationship with my mother. Despite the tension, I did try to stay in touch with my father, and by high school we rebuilt our relationship. He even came to my wedding, although it caused tension with my mom. As time passed, I grew closer to my father than my mother. He visited me twice in Ohio, but we lost him to a terminal illness last year. My mom didn't take kindly to my closeness with him, and her attitude grew colder, especially after my father named me as his heir. He remarried after their divorce, but it was clear I was still his only daughter, and he left me an inheritance of $400,000. I'll admit it, this caused tension between me and my mom and sister. They resented me for the inheritance, especially because my father had always funded my education, allowing me to attend better schools and colleges, and overall, I've led a more comfortable life than my sister. By the time I turned 12, my father's child support started flowing directly into my school fees. This made it hard for my mom to control the funds, and she couldn't hide much from me. Growing up, my mother and sister weren't particularly cruel to me, but there was definitely a sense of distance. They were tight-knit, and I was always the outsider. I didn't mind that much. I was a strong and clever child, not one to let anyone walk all over me. This also meant that my mom never treated me too poorly, but she certainly wasn't overly affectionate either. However, the situation has drastically changed now, as I'm facing requests from my mom and sister that I can no longer ignore or justify. Ever since I started working, they've reached out to me for financial help, and each time, I've given. But now, things have gone beyond my comfort zone. They're not just asking for small amounts anymore. They're demanding big sums, and it's always tied to some sort of emergency or urgent need. My mother works as a cashier at a supermarket, and my sister is a sales associate at a boutique. Their combined income barely touches half of what I make. I've always felt a sense of obligation to help them out because they're family and they've never been outright mean to me. They're not evil people, but the way they have manipulated my kindness is hard to ignore. A few months ago, my mom reached out saying that the house we grew up in was falling apart. The walls were crumbling, the ceilings were leaking, and the floors were damaged. She explained that the house hadn't been maintained in years and that the damages were becoming too dangerous to ignore. I could sense the hidden message behind her words. She wanted me to pay for the repairs. While I initially tried to avoid giving her a direct answer, it became apparent that this wasn't just a casual request. My mom and I have always had a strained relationship, and I'm sure you can imagine how awkward that conversation was. She was hinting at needing money, but neither of us wanted to directly acknowledge it. Eventually, she asked me for $100,000 to repair the house. My immediate reaction was disbelief. $100,000 was an outrageous sum, and I didn't have that kind of cash to just hand over. I told her I could lend her $50,000, which she happily accepted. In hindsight, I regret offering that much. I didn't trust her, but I still found myself caving in, probably because of the family bond. As a compromise, my husband suggested that we lend the money in installments and track the progress of the repairs. That seemed like a reasonable approach at the time. I transferred $10,000 into an old account I had in Houston, and I gave my mom access to it. She was confused at first, asking why I didn't send the money directly to her. I gave her some excuse, but honestly, it was a strategy my husband suggested to prevent her from taking more than necessary. To date, I've sent her $20,000, but I've decided that I won't send another penny. As time passed, I started noticing things that didn't add up. My sister was getting married, and I found out about it from a school friend, not even from my own family. It was a grand affair, far beyond what I had imagined my sister could afford. The wedding was a lavish $50,000 affair, complete with expensive decorations and a top-tier venue. The strange part was that the bank account I had been transferring money into for the supposed renovations was empty. When I called my mom asking for an update, she said the renovations were underway, but the house didn't seem to show any signs of it. That's when I started suspecting that the money I had given her wasn't going toward repairs at all. It was being used for my sister's wedding. My suspicions were confirmed when I learned that the wedding had been planned through my school friend's wedding planning business. To make matters worse, the house was, in fact, already renovated, but my mom continued to ask for money under the pretense of needing it for repairs. I reached out to my aunt, my father's sister, who lived nearby. She confirmed that the house had been renovated months ago, and the urgent need for repairs was nothing but a lie. It was all part of their scheme to extract money from me. I felt sick to my stomach. The money I had given for repairs had been siphoned off for a wedding that I wasn't even invited to. I was done. I stopped answering their calls and messages, but that didn't stop them from trying. They reached out to my husband, and that's when he accidentally let the truth slip. He told my mom that I knew everything, that they had lied to me about the renovations and that they were using my money for the wedding. My mom immediately began bombarding me with apologies, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. She tried to manipulate me into sending the remaining money, but I stood firm. I didn't trust them anymore. Eventually, my mom admitted the truth. She confessed that they had used the renovation story as an excuse to ask me for the money. They wanted to fund my sister's wedding, and my sister had suggested lying to me to get the money. I understand they have money problems, but it doesn't give them the right to manipulate me and extort money from me using emotions. After I heard all the truth, I hung up the call and cried for hours. I don't remember the last time I cried so hard. Maybe during my father's demise. I missed him so badly that day. I felt he was the only one who genuinely loved me and cared for me. After 2 days, I got a voicemail from Mom saying, "Now that you know, can you please send the remaining amount so that we can continue with the wedding preparations?" It disgusted me so much that I wanted to abuse her. If she was not my mother, how could she be so narcissistic? There was no remorse in her tone. All she wanted was money. They didn't ask me to come for the wedding, not even for the formality's sake. Now, when the truth came out, I felt so frustrated that I blocked both of them. I have also threatened my husband not to entertain their calls, and if this time he disobeys me, he would sleep outside on the porch in the cold night. I'm damn serious about this. I'm in constant touch with my aunt, and she told me that the wedding is next month. I didn't tell her the details about the money, but I know for sure that with each passing day, my mom and sister are having a hard time putting together the wedding they had desired. Good for them. I continued to get calls and voicemails from Mom and sister until the day of the wedding, asking me for the money. But I stood firm on my ground and didn't budge. On the wedding day, the last voicemail my mom sent was that she was ashamed of me and was disowning me, and that I should never call her mom or visit her ever. I was just so disheartened to hear that. I cried my heart out in front of my husband. I know people might call me evil and strong-headed for ruining my sister's wedding. My mom also accused me of that, calling me arrogant and self-centered, but she never thought about her lies. She deceived me all this while. I helped them because I felt obliged to. I considered them to be my family, but for them, I was nothing but a money-making machine. On the day of the wedding, I also got a call from my friend, whose husband was my sister's wedding planner. She told me that the wedding was most likely to get canceled because they were not paying the further installment of the wedding expenses. I asked her how much they had paid. She said $20,000. I said $20,000 is enough to put up a decent wedding. She said yes, but my sister had placed the order for top-notch decorations and food. The location, which was finalized, itself cost around $20,000. She asked me if I was attending. I said no. I had some other work, so I couldn't attend. My friend knew that I was not so close to my mom and sister. To be honest, I was sulking from within because I was responsible for ruining my sister's wedding. For a moment, I thought to transfer the remaining amount to my friend and ask her to continue the wedding as per the plan. Then I remembered my mother's last voicemail that she had disowned me. What's the point of doing so much for them when ultimately you get disowned? My actions might be bad, but it was a reaction to their malicious trigger. I switched off my phone and went with my kids for a day out to stay distracted. The next day, my friend again called me. She was angry at my sister because the wedding brought down her husband's reputation in the market. On the day of the wedding, Mom and sister pleaded with her husband to arrange for something bare minimum for the wedding and promised to pay $10,000 more. He somehow arranged for decent food and decoration because the advanced money of $20,000 was almost covered for the venue itself. However, the guests and the groom's family criticized the wedding arrangements very badly, and my sister blamed everything on the wedding planner. She told everyone that the planner had messed up everything. My friend said her husband was so infuriated that he wanted to tell everyone the truth, but my mom pleaded with him not to spoil my sister's life. He was a good man. He stood silent and took up the blame on himself and let the wedding happen. On top of that, they didn't even pay the promised $10,000 yet. I felt so embarrassed to hear this about my family. I just stood silent and did not say anything. My friend said she was not blaming me for anything, but she was just sharing her frustration with me as a friend. I felt bad that my family had to undergo such embarrassment, but I was also embarrassed with the way they had put all the blame on the wedding planner. After knowing all this, my husband said they got what they deserved, and I shouldn't be worrying too much about them. They brought this upon themselves because they tried to impress everyone by false means. I'm glad that I stay away from them and their tricks. Now I feel that my mother's disowning was a blessing in disguise, and I no longer have to deal with their lies and false tactics.